Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day, whatever time it may be for you. As you may notice, I'm in a totally different area. I'm currently in the Caroline Collins studio here at LAMDA. What? I don't want to do peace signs because then my video thing will do a thing. Anyway, yeah, I'll give you a little tour in a second, but yeah, back at it. Week 12, day 3, December the 3rd. 2025 of the Lambda log. Um, I am I booked this room out for an hour and a half. So theoretically no one should come in here, but it's always a little like nerve-wracking because you're like, ooh, what if somebody walks in and they watch me making my weird little videos that are just for myself? We shall see. Yeah. So also I have the computer propped up on a table, propped up, well, a table with it. The computer propped up on a seat, like a chair, propped up on a table, because my table in my bedroom where I usually do these videos is super high. And so it just looked like I was looking down at it. I was showing off my double chin. Mm, Anyway, I digress. So we just had 2 classes yesterday. We had at 3-ish. We had a little company meeting thrown in there. But we started out with Intro to Spanish Dance. And we're all going to be focusing basically on the flamenco, but it's going to be, we're going to have a little folk and some classical Spanish dance as well. But the flamenco is fascinating. I feel like I'm so far away. Yeah, sit up. Hmm. Um, yeah. First, our instructor, his name's Carlos. He was born in London, but his parents are from the north of Spain in Galicia, because he says it Spanishy. I would say Galicia, but he says Galicia because that's how you say it with a Spanish dialect. Um, and he's a flamenco dancer, and he's been doing that forever. And he just recently started singing as well. He played the bagpipes and learned Spanish folk and classical Spanish dance as well. But flamenco is his like bread and butter, heart and soul. I mean, not to sit up as straight. Um, yeah. So flamenco is it's a fascinating thing because it was started by the gypsies who were living in Spain at the time. And though gypsies isn't always considered like the proper term for them, he says that all of the people he knows, I don't know what I'm doing. I keep being unsatisfied. That little that little thing throw me off. I'm like, shouldn't my head be right here? Um, I digress. Again, sorry, I'm usually not making my video at 10 a.m. in the morning. It's usually at 6 or 5 or something. And so I got all these energies and I had a little donut because I I like them. Um, it's gonna be a good one. Also, when I look down, it's like all the way down. I'll hold this up. Flamenco. Flamenco, it was brought in by the gypsies. The gypsies, Carlos says that that's their what they call themselves, that's their self-referential term. And so some people call them Romani or like Romani. Um, he says that they don't use that, so he calls them gypsies because that's what they call themselves. But because they were um, a people without a land, they they learned to adapt cultures and take them into their own, you know. And so flamenco, um, the gypsies were welcome in southern Spain, and it's one of the few places. And this was during the Muslim rule, like the Moorish rule of Spain. And so I think it was like the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken. I got a lot of information, but it was all kind of, I'm just gonna read my notes. That'll be better. They're just a little all over the place. Um, So flamenco is not well revered in the north of Spain. It's looked like as gypsy dancing in a negative way. It's like, oh, that's not what we do. We do classical or we do folk dance. We don't do that gypsy kind of dancing. Um, but fascinatingly, because the UK doesn't have a ton of like agreed upon cultural traditional past. There's some traditional dances and traditional things, but a lot of it has been lost to time and to assimilation and everything. And so because of that, the UK is one of the big leaders in contemporary movements of art because they don't have that past to rely on or to hold strong to. They're really good at bringing, sorry, ignore me. They're really good at bringing contemporary ideas and contemporary um, being at the forefront of this contemporary art movement, such as like rock, right? British rock was huge in like the 80s, the 70s, and the 80s, 60s as well with the Beatlemania. Um, and so it was interesting to think of that, like not having a deep cultural and traditional history can be beneficial to you and keep you present and in the now. And I feel that because I don't have a huge cultural connection to things. I mean, I'm Irish, Danish, British, like if you go far enough back. But I don't have these rich cultural ties or things. I have my LDS culture, or being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, kind of that Christian culture, but that's different too. It's yeah, it has its things, but I don't know. So it was cool to be like, hey, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, yeah. And then a little bit about the history of flamenco. No one agrees about the history because it's been so fluid and so just learned. Um, and just it's word of mouth and it evolves and changes for everyone. But it has this feeling and this thought about being really traditional, but it was kind of originated really in 1850, but has adopted and allowed itself to evolve. Um, right, like an example is in the 90s, breakdance was added to it in the burlerias for y'all non-Spanish speaking folk. Burleria. To make it the audience laugh or respond. It's a very relationshipal art form. Um, yeah, it has an ancient feel to it, but it's really quite modern and quite contemporary in its evolving. Um, so the gypsies are said to have come from India to Spain, but they brought some of like the Indian, I don't know it, but hand signals and the sign language in like Bollywood dance and in traditional Indian folk dance. And so in flamenco, there's still all of this like hand movements and stuff, but it's lost its connection to language. It just has this flourish to it. And so the hands are always active. Mm-mm-mm. Andalusia um, has a very Arabic feeling to it because um, all the Catholics pushed the Moors to the south of Spain when they were kind of taking that over. And so that's where it was like born, and that's why there's a lot of Arabic influences in flamenco as well. And then there's a lot of Latin American influence as well um, as they took examples and ideas from that as well. It was just very fluid, and they were even influenced um, by French modernism with like stripping and that burlesque style, and with American jazz improvisationalists, right? because there is no choreography per se in flamenco. It's all in the moment, and there's music. So the way it's set up, as far as I understand, I could be getting a lot of this wrong. I was just writing down notes as fast as I could. I was like, thanks, Carlos. But so you have the dancer, and the dancer is kind of leading the whole thing out, and then the singer follows the dancer, and they take cues from the dancer, and then the band follows the singer who's following the dancer. So there's a band, a singer, and a dancer, and it all like originates with this dancer kind of doing their thing. Well, actually, no, shoulders and torso is all very still. I'll get to some poor demonstration in a minute. Um, but yeah, so right, it was a gypsy tradition to take certain things and adopt them into their own liking. It's a fusion to make something new and interesting and unique to them. There's no expert consensus on the history or traditions of flamenco. It has evolved and changed so much. Flamenco is making it up on the spot, and it's using the code of flamenco technique. So there's certain codes and things that you learn. Like if you want to start, I'll give you a little bit. Like if you want to, no, it's too high, whatever. So if you want to start, you can stomp 3 times, and that's like a code or a signal to the singer, boop, boop, that you're ready for them to begin their verse. Sorry, this table's wobbly. Anyway, um, and then burleria was usually at the end. It was the fin de fiestas, the end of the party, and it's fast and it's like a full dance off, and it's typically not more than 2 minutes, and it should be about you and your skill and showing off and be like grabbing the audience's attention. And a tradition was if you're nervous, you go first because someone could go and be incredible and you don't want to have to like follow them. So you go and you're like, hey, that's my thing. Flamenco doesn't choreograph, and the singers go off of the dancers, and the accompanist goes after the dancer and the singer, like I said. They made a little warm up, and some things to keep in mind is they don't really count. They kind of do bouts. It's like on the chick chick ka kind of a thing, like a lot of choreographers do. But it's kind of on 12 counts. And so unless you want to start the music, then it's on 3, but sometimes it's 9 and sometimes it's 6. Um, okay, let me let me open this up. Okay, I want to get the feet in this as much as possible. Welcome to the Caroline Collins studio. Here, I'm almost there. Okay, boom. So in flamenco, the women, there's always a softness to the knees, and your core is sucked in, and your chest is up, and it's squared off, and your pelvis is tilted forward a little bit. It's active, and it's got this. And so with the women, it's all this kind of bent knees, and it's wide because they had these big dresses. And so if you're moving, it has this hip roll to it, right? This kind of boom, and the stomps always start from the back. Bah. This is a very poor example, um, but that's kind of the idea. And the men are very just straight. Bah, 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 bah. And it has this like stomping little effect to it. And the men always stomp forward, da, da, and the women kind of have this wider, the big skirts, right? So big stomp to the side. So we did a warm up where we did some stomps and stuff. We did some stomps. You always want your knees to have a little bend to them, even if you're the man, you don't want to lock anything. But it's got this bend to it. Um, so then we worked on this little sequence, and I'm not going to remember it, but I'll go for it. Hope that wasn't too loud. Oh, and then the arms is super important too. I'll go back further. So the arms, the elbows always stay out. I hope that this is being heard. The elbows are always out. Yeah. It's like you have a basket. So you bring your arms up, and then this is very common, this kind of, and then you sweep it in and bring it up. And then when you're doing these kind of grabs, you really want to keep your arm as steady as possible. So you don't want your arm moving. And there's something that is like practiced a lot. Like, of course, my bones are rotating, but you want to keep that move. You don't want to go like this. And then with the chest as well, you don't want to move it as you're it's not like a stomp, bad, stomp, bad, stomp. Right? It's very straight, and you don't want to move your torso almost at all. That's why the hips are important. Just kind of roll into it. Bah, bah. Okay, so corazón. He sang for us too a little bit as he was helping us do it. We did that. Bam, para. Ya no estás a mi lado, corazón. Something like that. I'm missing a word, but we did this. I couldn't get my feet and my arms right at the same time, but we da, 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 ba, 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 ba. And then here, where were we? And he's always like, you always want to like grab your clothes and have your hands actively doing something, but your elbows out. I mean, this was day one, so I'll get it better. And then we went stomp, sweep, heel down. And then we spun. I think as we did this with our arms, grabbing your shirt or your skirts or something. And then we went bah, 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 bah. And then when it was something like bah, oh, we did that at some point. I don't remember it. I was trying. But the idea is you get these sweeping motions, and it's always da, 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 da. Oh yeah, we did that at one point. Anyway, so it's super cool, fascinating art form, big fan. Um, I know I don't want this to fall. I know very little about it. But I had that day and it was super fun. And Carlos is a party and a half, big fan of his. Um, so yeah, that was cool. And then we had Rodney Cotier. Courtier? Rodney. He's the guy who auditioned me in New York and accepted me into this program. Thanks, Rodney. He's been a little ill, and he does a lot of work in the US too, so he gets pretty busy. Um, but he gave us our introduction. Let me pull it up to the Jacobean period, and it was a classic lecture. But Rodney is so brilliant and fascinating that he makes it all so interesting. And we got some paperwork of yours. And this is a master's program. There are some things. And we have this little um, family tree. And I'm not going to share it with you exactly. Cotier. I think it's Cotier. Rodney Cotier. Anyway, because it's his personal thing, but he just broke down all of the history from Henry VII, who was Richmond in Richard III, who we had in our showing. And then he was fascinating because we really played him as kind of this pacifist and this guy who's really connected into the earth and naturalism, and to be a huge juxtaposition from Richard and his warmongering. And but apparently he was nothing like that. They well, we'll get to it in a second. But he killed anyone he didn't like. So something to keep in mind is there's the Tudor family, right? The Tudors, that's the Henrys, and that is, I think it starts with, yeah, so there's Margaret Tudor and Mary Tudor, and Henry Tudor, who becomes Henry VII. And so the Tudor family is the Henrys. It's coming back to Henry VII, Richmond. Um, and so this is the Tudors, but then we got a little influx from some others with the Stuarts, which were the Scottish kings, and then the Stuarts were restored. And so it's kind of like the houses of Tudor was from 1485 to 1603, and then from 1603 to 1649 um, was the Stuarts, and then the Stuarts were reestablished in 1660 all the way to 1714. Because James the First of England was before that James the Sixth of Scotland, King of Scotland. So um, Jacobean is referring to the reign of King James. I don't know why Jack is like a nickname for James, but I think it is. So Jacobean is King James. Um, and there's a little bit of the Caroline period, which was Caroline Collins. That's the studio I'm in. But the Caroline period was with Charles the First and Second, which I thought that the current King of England, like in 2025, was Charles II, but he must be the third, and I must have got that mistaken. Anyway, so um, so the Caroline period, yeah, was the reign of King Charles I. Richmond was King Henry the Seventh, and he ushered in the time of the Welsh kings, and he was famous for uniting the red rose and the white, and he brought peace to England, and ended the civil war between the House of Lancaster and the House of York. British history is fascinating, fun, crazy. It's like a soap opera. Um, but the Tudors were kind of awful. They killed anyone they didn't like. They destroyed a bunch of architecture and artwork, and they did some heinous deeds. King Henry VII actually made his coronation date to the time before the battle that kind of secured him the position, so that he could claim that all those who fought against him were fighting against God's anointed king. And so he was able to kill them all for treason, and legally able to do so. And these plays are all about like favorites and bringing lower people up, right? So the king would have his favorites, and um he would give them all the things that they wanted, and he would treat them better. And so you were trying to find favor with the king, and work your way up like that. So Charles Charles V, who was the king of Spain at the time and the emperor of the Holy Roman Army, the Holy Roman Empire, and a contemporary to Henry VII, had a daughter named Catherine of Aragon. And to unite England and Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, which kind of then dissolved into the Habsburg Empire, um, Henry VII married off his son Arthur, the Prince of Wales, to Catherine of Aragon. And then they finally were going to have a King Arthur. But then Arthur died. And so his brother, Henry, um, Henry VIII, was was to take control and was to become king. And so Henry VII, Richmond, right? He didn't want to lose that connection with Spain and that alliance. So he said, "Hey, just marry Catherine. Now that your brother's dead, take her." So he did. Um, and the so the Holy Roman Empire is the Catholic Church, and so at this time they're all Catholics, and you find that um, I don't know if I have it on me, but on the coins, on the English coins, there's some letters that are D, G, and REG, and F and D, and they're all about this holy title that the Catholic gave King Henry the Eighth as being like divinely begotten and king and um, the Lord's anointed. And it's hilarious because even though England is Protestant now and for most of its history, um, from James onward, really with Elizabeth, yeah, Elizabeth the First, she kind of ushered in Protestantism. Well, I mean, really, it was Henry the Eighth first with the Church of England, but they keep these papal um, honors that were given, and they're written on their coins today. Anyway, Catherine wouldn't have any more kids, and so then Henry VIII started to realize, hey, um, this is a problem. One, because I don't have an heir, and two, because Catherine of Aragon is my brother's wife, and there's a scripture in Deuteronomy that says, "Thou shalt not covet thy brother's wife." And he got all confused. He's like, I think I'm committing sin, and so he asked the Pope to be able to divorce her because of the scriptures, and the Pope was in Spain's pocket because Spain was the emperor was in control of the Holy Roman Empire. And I think the Pope was imprisoned at this time. I don't know if that's literally or just had to do whatever the Spain said. And Spain was like, no, we don't want to lose our alliance with England. Say he can't divorce him. And it was like, sorry, you can't divorce him. And then King Henry VIII was like, dumb, I'm going to do that anyway. So he created the Church of England and divorced Catherine of Aragon. And then, oh, I should visit the Ham House, which is the best preserved Jacobean house. That's somewhere I should go. And then so Henry VIII is a Protestant, and then he marries Anne Boleyn, which was Catherine of Aragon's lady in waiting. And Elizabeth was born of Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth the First, but she was probably born before Henry VIII married Anne Boleyn, so she's a bastard child, and because she was born at 7 months, and all these things, right? So she was probably conceived out of wedlock, being therefore a bastard. And then Anne gives birth to a boy, but it's a stillbirth, and Henry kind of blames her, and then there's all these problems, and so he beheads her for adultery. Used a sword instead of an axe, which is apparently quicker and nicer. But then we should look into the life of Thomas Cromwell, because Cromwell then got Henry VIII his next wife, which was Anne of Cleves. But she was the one who she was German, I think, and she had her portrait shown, and then they did not consummate the wedding, and so Henry claimed that she didn't look like she did in her portrait, and he divorced her. But what probably happened was that he was an obese and ulcerous and disgusting man who had open, stinking wounds on his legs. And so they didn't consummate the marriage because he was disgusting. But then he blamed it on, hey, she doesn't look like her picture. And Thomas Cromwell was the one who got her. And so he died for it. Um, yes, crazy stuff. And then Catherine of Howard was beheaded for sleeping around. Um, and Henry VIII died of syphilis and bad health. Glorious. Right? He had another wife in there. I can't remember her name, but the sixth one. Right? Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Anne of Cleves. Um, Catherine of Howard. I'm missing one. Divorced, beheaded, survived. No, divorced, beheaded, died. Died. I missed the one who died. Well, she wasn't important to the story, I guess. Divorced, beheaded, died, survived. Anyway, and so then Edward where am I? Edward the sixth becomes um, king, and he's a Protestant, and he is king at the age of 11. So he's the one son. Oh, Jane Seymour. She's the one who survived and gave, or Jane Seymour, the only one he truly loved. I died. Da, 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 da. Yeah, maybe she's the one who died. Anyway, she had a son, Edward. And so Edward at age 11 became king, and he was a Protestant, right? Which is important. And then Mary, um, Bloody Mary, became king after Edward. I think Edward died. I don't remember what happened to Edward, but Mary becomes queen and she's Catholic. So you went from Protestant to Catholic. And the whole country was Catholic. And then um Henry VIII changed their religion, and they're like, oh, but so many of them were still culturally Catholic, so it was confusing. And then Edward VI was Catholic, and I mean was Protestant, and then Mary became queen, and she was Catholic, and she was known for burning heretics, and she marries King Philip of Spain, and she thought she was pregnant, but it turned out that she was had cancer instead. And so Philip left her and she died. Then Elizabeth becomes queen, and Mary, the Queen of Scots, claims that Queen Elizabeth is a bastard and that Mary should be queen because Mary marries the next king apparent, which is Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, and because he's the next king apparent, she claims to have the right to the throne. But and Mary, Queen of Scots, is a Catholic, but Scotland is not Catholic, and so Scotland is Calvinist Protestant, so very kind of strict Protestant religion. And Elizabeth's a Protestant, and she is anti-Catholic, and so then Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, marries to Mary, Queen of Scots, but Mary is um, had him garroted in the garden, which is strangled to death. And then she married the murderer. And so Queen Elizabeth was like, no, 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 no. No, you clearly just tried to put yourself in line and then got rid of the thing that put you in line. So she, for her protection, brought her into captivity. I think she was in the Tower of London. And her son, James, baby boy James, James, who would be the sixth of the Scots, and later the first James first of England. He was found in the garden at the same time, and they also had put explosives under um, under Henry Stuart Lord Darnley's bed, and so they were going to blow him up, and then he went to jump out the window, but they were waiting for him, and then they strangled him, and they found the baby in the garden after all this had happened. It's like, oh, he was 1 year old, and they're like, oh, were they trying to blow up the baby too? And it was kind of this situation, and so baby James is found in the garden, and he becomes King of Scotland, and is at 1 year old, and is raised Protestant because Elizabeth sees to that, and then Elizabeth keeps his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots, prisoner for her protection for 16 years, and she doesn't let James communicate with her so that he doesn't become Protestant. I mean, so he doesn't become Catholic. Then everyone tried to kill Elizabeth and put Mary, the Queen of Scots, and Mary as Queen of England, because the world wanted her to be Catholic and to England to be Catholic because it would just help with everything because everyone else was Catholic in Europe. But it didn't work because she kept avoiding death. And then she found a bunch of letters that condemned um, Mary, and so she put Mary on trial and beheaded her. And they did it with an axe, and it took 3 times. The first time it like hit her head, it kind of got lodged in her skull, and then it hit her back, and then they finally hit her neck. And then when they tried to like hold up her head to like show that Mary, Queen of Scots, is dead, she'd gone gray, and so she was wearing a wig, and so they tried to lift up her head, and the head came up, and her head, like the hair came up, and her head came down, and it was a big mess. Um, and then she went to oh, and then Spain was like, well, Mary was a anointed of God. She was a queen, and only God can kill the anointed of God. And so Charles then attacks those on those grounds, which is the Spanish Armada, and Elizabeth destroys them. It is a very failed attempt. And Elizabeth eventually dies, which has James um, become king. And he spent more on his coronation than Elizabeth did in her entire reign. And Elizabeth reigned from 58 to 1603. So 5 years, is that it? No, 1558 to 1603. So that's a lot more time. Math. 40 something years, like 40 something years. Um, and so then, yeah, so in that 40 odd years, James spends more money on his coronation than she did that entire time, which is crazy. And then many of the Shakespeare scenes were performed to James and his people, like um, his court, his favorites, in the castle, in the court. And so there's a bunch of plays that take place at night in castles because they were performed to King James and his constituents in castles at night. Um, and so these writers and performers were very brave and courageous because they would like call the king out on tyranny and stuff to his face, but then say it was, oh, it's just, Italy. And all these plays during this time that took place in other countries, it wasn't really that. It was just that in name. It was really talking about English politics. So to offend the king could lead to death and treason. And as we perform these, which are going to be our next projects, the Jacobean plays, but we're not doing Shakespeare, which is fun, is there are four main themes that we really need to keep in mind. One is Catholicism versus Protestantism. It's the bravery and calling out of kings, the favoritism, and the journey of the soul. So the plays that we talked about and the plays we talked about are The White Devil by John Webster, The Duchess of Malfi, John Webster. That one's a Caroline play, not a Jacobean, but we're still lumping it in here because the Caroline period was so short. Charles became king for like 1 second. When was that? I was right after James, but it didn't last very long. He was executed. Anyway, and so um and so then though the Duchess of Malfi and "'Tis Pity She's a Whore" was one by John Ford, and then "Love Sacrifice" was another one by John Ford, and then The Geese is his last lost play, which got him silenced because he performed it, and it was like just talking about, I think he condemned the killing of Protestants or something. Um, but it would like stir up revolution, and so they burned every copy, and it's lost today. But all these plays, they deal with young women and men, and there's huge rebellions have occurred, um, and half of Shakespeare's plays are about women and their fathers, and this because this revolution is beginning, and women's rights and purpose and life and place. Um, some fun little facts. Green was used to be the color of wedding dresses because of um, fertility and spring and new rebirth. And it wasn't, the white wedding dress was an invention of Victoria, like so many things. Um, and in the White Devil, she is the main woman is wearing green at her wedding, and then she's wearing black at the end of her funeral. But then the only person wearing white is the Pope because he's the White Devil, um, which shows that uh, anti-Catholicism. And then, um, yeah, so the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, is the White Devil. And then James had the Duke of Buckingham at the time, not the character I played, but the later one, who was his favorite and also probably his gay lover. It talks about how much he loved and cared for him more than anyone else, more than he could ever love a woman, and things like that. Um, there was the Orange Revolution in Ireland. I don't have a lot of information on that, but that's true. Another important Catholic belief at the time, which led and continued in Protestantism, is that you must pray before you die, or you won't go to heaven. And so if you're despairing when you die, if you're in pain or you're despairing, you go to hell. I don't know where they came up with these ideas, but they were held. That's why in Richard III we say despair and die, despair and die, despair and die. It basically is saying go to hell and die, or die and go to hell. Um, yeah. And so people in these plays often try to kill people in disparaging ways, such as poison was a favorite method to kill people so that they would die in despair and go to hell. And then that's why in Macbeth, he's desperate to kill Duncan before he wakes up so that he doesn't despair, but he goes straight to heaven. That's why it's such a brutal um, murder and blood gets everywhere. It's because he's desperate not to wake him up. And we know that he didn't wake up because he doesn't appear as a ghost. And a ghost meant that you were despaired and you were not happy and you went to hell, basically. That's where you're just like hanging out before you go to hell, which is interesting. So yeah, so ghosts are damn souls. And then the last words you want to say if you're Catholic or probably also Protestant is mercy, because if you say mercy as your last word, taking upon you the mercy of God, then you get to go to heaven. And so, yeah. And then, fun fact is in the first performance of Twelfth Night, Giovanni Orsino saw himself on stage as Orsino the King, and that was the character he was based off of. And then um, the humors were aligned um, with the elements. So air is blood, water is phlegm, earth is black bile, and fire is choler, which were the four humors which they tried to balance to make you happy and healthy or something. And then we should buy this book called Timetables of History, which will give you a year and then everything that's happening at that time so that you can just really get good context immediately and quickly. And then that was the end of Jacobean. I know, a lot. Um, but then we had a little company meeting as we did some surveys because we just did some little feedback and we had time to do that. And like, hey, what did you think of your classes and stuff? It's like, yeah, it was good. Thanks. Oh, my leg fell asleep. Um, and some things that Ollie said was when he talked to George after the showings, he said, "Oh my gosh, the growth," which is great. And tomorrow, um, not tomorrow, Friday, which is today's tomorrow. Call time and rehearsal is 10:10 for the concert, and the concert will be at 1:30. Don't be drunk. Don't be visibly drunk. That's what Ollie said, because apparently a bunch of people got just wasted before the concert and then were making all sorts of a ruckus. The concert should be done by 3:30 or 4 at the very latest, and then we're off to the races and we're free to do whatever we want and party. Um, oh, they want to foster reflection here, and that's why we do these surveys partially. Next semester's plays, the ones that we're doing, is Duchess of Malfi, 'Tis Pity She's a Whore, and The Revenger's Tragedy. Ollie will be directing The Revenger's Tragedy. Um, and then Ollie's feeling about accents, or a lot of the time it gets in the way of character and truth. And so he usually waits until we get to restoration to see if we want to do an RP or a heightened dialect. And then a book he says to buy is The Mirror of Great Britain by Clara Jackson. And that was the day. And then we rehearsed our Hark, see the bell, do, 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 Carol of the Bells. And that was December the 3rd, Wednesday. Um, oh, also at lunch, I had a rehearsal for 12 Days to Christmas, 12 Days to Christmas, our little MT thing that we're doing for the Christmas concert. I got to do that again today. But yeah, that was the day. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I hope y'all have a good day. And oh, and then at the end, I was able to see Time and Conway's. So I got home a little late, but it was lovely. Good show. Fascinating. It was awesome. Okay. Love you.